Chapter 5. The People of the Drama. Have you seen all you want of the study? Asked White Mason as he entered the house. For the first time, said the inspector, and Holmes nodded. Then perhaps you would like to hear the evidence of some of the people in the house. We could use the dining room. Amends, please come yourself and tell us what you would like to know, said the inspector, and Holmes nodded. Then perhaps you would like to hear the evidence of some of the people in the house. The butler's account was simple and a clear one. The dining room. He gave a convincing impression of the sincerity. Apologies. He had been engaged 5 years before, when Douglas had first come to Burlstone. He understood that Mr. Douglas was a rich gentleman who had made his money in America. He had a kind of considerate employer, not quite what Ames was used to, perhaps, but one can't have everything. He never saw any signs of apprehension in Mr. Douglas. On the contrary, he was the most fearless man he had ever known. He ordered the drawbridge to be pulled up every night because it was the ancient custom of the old house, and he liked to keep up the old ways. Mr. Douglas seldom went down to London or left the village, but on the day before the crime he had been shopping Timberidge Wells. Ames had observed some restlessness and excitement on the part of Mr. Douglas that day, for he had seemed impatient and irritable, which was unusual with him. He had not gone to bed that night, but was in the pantry of the back of the house, putting away the silver, when he heard the bell ring violently. He heard no shot, but it was hardly possible he would, as the pantry and the kitchens were at the very back of the house, and there were several closed doors and long passages between. The housekeeper had come out of her room, attracted by the violent ringing of the bell. They had gone to the front of the house together. As they reached the bottom of the stairs, he had seen Miss Douglas coming down to it. No, she was not hurrying. It did not seem to him that she was particularly agitated. Just reached the bottom of the stair, Mr. Baker had rushed out of the study. He had stopped Miss Douglas and begged her to go back. "For God's sakes, go back to your room," he cried. "Poor Jack is dead. You can do nothing. For God's sakes, go back." After some persuasion upon the stairs, Miss Douglas had gone back. She did not scream. She made no outcry whatever. Miss Allen, the housekeeper, had taken her upstairs and stayed with her in the bedroom. Ames and Mr. Barker had returned to the study, where they found everything exactly as the police had seen it. The candle was not lit at the time, but the lamp was burning. They had looked at the window, but the night was very dark and nothing could be seen or heard. and rushed out into the hall, where Ames had turned the windlass, which lowered the drawbridge. Mr. Baker and then hurried off to get the police. Such in its essentials was the evidence of the butler. The account of Mrs. Allen, the housekeeper, was, so far as it went, a corroboration of that of her fellow servant. The housekeeper's room was rather nearer to the front of the house than the pantry, in which Ames had been working. She was preparing to go to bed, and the loud ringing of the bell attracted her to the attention. She was a little hard of hearing. Perhaps that's why she had not heard the shot. But in any case, the study was a long way off. She remembered hearing some sound which she imagined to be the slamming of a door. That was a good deal earlier. Half an hour, at least, before the ringing of the doorbell. When Mr. Ames ran to the front, she went with him and saw Mr. Barker, very pale and excited, come out to the study. He intercepted Miss Douglas, who was coming down the stairs, and entreated her to go back. And she answered him, but what she said could not be heard. "Take her up. Stay with her," he said to Miss Allen. She had therefore taken her to the bedroom and endeavored to soothe her. She was greatly excited, trembling all over, but made no other attempts to go downstairs. She just sat in a dressing gown by her bedroom fire, with her head sunk into her hands. Miss Allen stayed with her most of the night, and to the other servants. They had all gone to bed, and the alarm did not reach them until just before the police arrived. They slept in the extreme back of the house and could not possibly have heard anything. So far, the housekeeper could do nothing on cross-examination save lamentations and expressions of amazement. Cecile Barker succeeded Miss Allen as a witness as to the occurrence of the night before. He had very little to add to what was already told the police. Personally, he was convinced that the murderer had escaped by the window. The bloodstain was conclusive, in his opinion, on that point. Besides, as the bridge was up, there was no other possible way of escaping. He could not explain what had become of the assassin, or why he had not taken his bicycle if it was indeed his. He could not possibly have been drowned in the moat, which was at no place more than 3 feet deep. In his own mind, he was very definite theory about the murderer. Douglas was a certain man, and those were some chapters in his life which he never spoke. He had immigrated to America when he was a very young man, and prospered well, and Baker had first met him in California, where they had some partners in a successful mining claim at a place called Benito Canyon. They had done very well, but Douglas had suddenly sold off his share. Suddenly sold out and started for England. He was a widower at that time. Barker had afterwards realized his money and come to live in London, thus had renewed their friendship. Douglas had given him the impression that some danger was hanging over his head, and he had always looked upon the sudden departure from California, and also his renting a house in so quiet a place in England, as being connected with this peril. He imagined that some secret society, some implacable organization, was on Douglas' track and would never rest until it killed them. Some remarks of his had given him this idea, though never had told him what society was, nor had it come to offend it. He could only suppose that the legend upon the placard had been some reference to this secret society. "How long were you with Douglas in California?" asked Inspector MacDonald. 5 years altogether. He was a bachelor, you say? A widower? Have you ever heard where his first wife came from? No, I remember him saying she was of German extraction, and I have seen her portrait. She was a very beautiful woman. She died of typhoid the year before I met him. You don't associate his past with any particular part of America. I've heard him talk of Chicago. He knew that city well and worked there. I have heard him talk of the coal and the iron districts. He had traveled a good deal in his time. Was he a politician? Had he the secret society to do with politics? No, he cared nothing about politics. You have no reason to think it was criminal. On the contrary, I never met a straighter man in my life. Was there anything curious about his life in California? He liked best to stay and to work at our claim in the mountains. He would never go where other men were if he could help it. That's why I first thought that someone was after him. And then when he left so suddenly for the Empire, I made sure that it was so. I believed he had a warning of some sort. Within a week of his leaving, half the dozen men were inquiring for him. What sort of men? Well, they were a mighty hard-looking crowd. They came up to the claim and wanted to know where he was. I told them he was gone to Europe and that I did not know where to find him. They meant him no good. It was easy to see that. Where are these men Americans? Californians? Well, I don't know about the Californians. They were Americans, all right, but they were not miners. I don't know what they were, and I was very glad to see their backs. That was 6 years ago. Nearly 7. And then you were there together 5 years in California, so that this business dates back not less than 11 years at least. That is so. It must be a very serious feud that would kept up with such earnestness for so long as that. It would be no light thing that would give rise to it. I think it shadowed his whole life. It was never quite out of his mind. But if a man had danger hanging over him and knew what it was, don't you think he would turn to police for protection? Maybe it was some danger that he could not protect against. There was one thing you should know. He was always went about armed. His revolver was never out of his pocket. But by bad luck, he was in the dressing gown that had left it in the bedroom that night. Once bridge was up, I guess he thought he was safe. I should like these dates a little clearer, said MacDonald. It was quite 6 years since Douglas left California. He followed him next year, did you not? That is so. And he had been married for 5 years. He must have returned about the time of his marriage. About a month before, I was his best man. Did you know Miss Douglas before her marriage? No, I did not. I'd always been away from England for 10 years, but you've seen a good deal of her since. Barker looks sternly at the detective. I have seen a good deal of him since, he answered. If I have seen her, it is because you cannot visit a man without knowing his wife. If you imagine there is any connection. I imagine nothing, Mr. Barker. I am bound to make every inquiry which can bear upon the case by no offense. Some inquiries are offensive, Barker answered angrily. It is only the facts we want, in your interest and everyone's interest, that they should be cleared up. Did Mr. Douglas entirely approve your friendship with his wife? Barker grew paler, and his great strong hands were clasped convulsively together. You have no right to ask such questions, he cried. What does it have to do with the matter you are investigating? I must repeat the question. Well, I refuse to answer. You can refuse to answer, but you must be aware that your refusal in itself is an answer, for you would not refuse if you had not something to conceal. Barker stood for a moment with his face set grimly and his strong black eyebrows drawn in low and intense thought. Then he looked up with a smile. Well, I guess you gentlemen are only doing your clear duty after all, and I have no right to stand in the way of it. I'd only ask you not to worry Miss Douglas over this matter, for she has enough upon her just now. I may tell you that poor Douglas had just one fault in the world, and that was his jealousy. He was fond of me. No man could be fonder of a friend, and he was devoted to his wife. He loved me to come here, and was forever sending for me. And yet, if his wife and I talked together, or there seemed any sympathy between us, a kind of wave of jealousy would pass over him, and he would be off the handle, saying the wildest things in a moment. More than once, I've sworn off coming for that reason, and then he would write me such a penitent, imploring letters that I just had to. But you can take it from me, gentlemen. If it was my last word, no man had ever more loving, faithful wife. And I can say no friend could have been more loyal than I. It was spoken with fervent feeling, and yet Inspector MacDonald could not dismiss the subject. You are aware, said he, the dead man's wedding ring had been taken from his fingers. So it appears, said Barker. Do you mean by appears? You know it as a fact. The man seemed confused and undecided. When I said appears, I meant that it was conceivable that he had taken the ring off. The mere fact the ring should be absent, whoever may have removed it, would suggest to anyone's mind, would it not, that the marriage was and the tragedy were connected. Barker shrugged his shoulders. I can't profess to say what it means, he answered. But if you mean a hint, then it could reflect in any way upon his lady's honor. His eyes blazed for an instant, and then, with evident effort, he got a grip over his own emotions. Well, you're on the wrong track, that's all. I do not know that anything else to ask you at present, said MacDonald coldly. There was one point, remarked Sherlock Holmes. When you entered the room, there was only a candle lighted on the table, was there not? Yes. By its light, you saw some terrible incident had occurred. Exactly. And you rang for help. Yes. And it arrived very speedily, within a minute or so. And yet, when they arrived, they found that the candle was out and the lamp had been lighted. It seems very remarkable. Again, Barker showed some signs of indecision. I don't see that as remarkable, Mr. Holmes, he answered after a pause. The candle threw very bad light. My first thought was to get a better one. The lamp was on the table, so I lit it. And blew out the candle? Exactly. Holmes had no further questions, and Barker was most deliberate. Look from one to the other of us, which it had, as it seemed to me, something of defiance in it. Turned and left the room. Inspector MacDonald had set up a note to the effect that he would wait upon Miss Douglas in her room, but she had replied that she would meet us in the dining room. She entered now, tall, beautiful woman of 30, reserved and self-possessed to a remarkable degree, very different from the tragic and distracted figure I had pictured. It is true that her face was pale and drawn, like that of one who had endured great shock, but her manner was composed, and finely molded hand on which she rested on the edge of the table was as steady as my own. Her sad, appealing eyes traveled from one to another of us with a curiosity inquisitive expression. The questioning gaze transformed itself suddenly into abrupt speech. Have you found anything out yet? She asked. Is it my imagination that there was an undertone of fear rather than of hope in the question? We have taken up every possible step, Miss Douglas, said the inspector. You may rest assured that nothing will be neglected. Spare no money, she said in a dead, even tone. It is my desire that every possible effort should be made. Perhaps you can tell me something which may throw some light upon the matter. I fear not, but all I know is at your service. We have heard from Miss Cecile Baker that you did not actually see, that you were never in the room where the tragedy occurred. No, he turned me back upon the stairs. He begged me to return to my room. Quite so. You have heard the shot, and you had once come downstairs. I put on my dressing gown, then came down. How long after hearing the shot were you stopped on the stairs by Mr. Barker? It had been a couple of minutes. It is so hard to reckon the time at such a moment. He implored me not to go on. He assured me that there was nothing. And then Miss Ellen and the housekeeper led me upstairs again. It was all like some kind of dreadful dream. Can you give us any idea of how long your husband had been downstairs before you heard the shot? No, I cannot say. He went from his dressing room, and I did not hear him go. He did round the house every night, for he was a nervous of fire, and it was the only thing I have ever known him to be nervous of. That is just the point of which I want to come in to, Miss Douglas. You've only known your husband only in England, have you not? Yes. We have been here married 5 years. Have you heard him speak of anything which occurred in America and might be doing some danger upon him? Miss Douglas thought earnestly. She answered. Yes, she said at last. I've always felt there was a danger hanging over him. He refused to discuss it with me. It was not from the want of confidence in me. There was the most complete love and confidence between us, but it was out of his desire to keep all alarm away from me. He thought I shouldn't brood over it if I knew all, and so he was silent. How did you know it then? Miss Douglas' face lit with a quick smile. Can a husband ever carry about a secret all his life and a woman who loves him have no suspicion of it? I knew he refused to talk about some episodes in his American life. I knew it by certain precautions he took. I knew it by certain words he let fall. I knew it by the way he looked at unexpected strangers. I was perfectly certain he had at least some powerful enemies, that he believed they were on his track, and that he was always on his guard against them. I was so sure of that for years. I had been terrified if he ever came home later than was expected. Might I asked Holmes, what are the words which attracted your attention? The Valley of Fear, the lady answered. That was an expression he used when I questioned him. I have been in the Valley of Fear, and I'm not out of it yet. And we're never to get out of this Valley of Fear. I've asked him when I have seen him more serious than usual. Sometimes I think we never shall, he has answered. Surely, you have asked him what he meant by this Valley of Fear. I did, but his face would become very grave and he would shake his head. It is bad enough that one of us should be and been in a shadow, he said. Please God that it shall never fall upon you. It was some real valley in which he had lived, in which had something terrible had occurred to him. Of that I am certain. I can tell you no more. And he never mentioned any names. Yes, he was delirious fever once, and he had a hunting accident 3 years ago. Then I remembered that there was a name he continually to his lips. He spoke of with anger of some sort of whore. McGinty was his name. Master of, never of mine, thank God, he answered with a laugh. And that was all I could get from him. But there is a connection between Bodymaster McGinty and the Valley of Fear. There is one other point, said Inspector MacDonald. You met Mr. Douglas in a boarding house in London, did you not? And became engaged to him there. Was there any romance, any secret or mystery about the wedding? There was romance. There was always romance. There was nothing mysterious. He had no rival? No, I was quite free. You've heard, no doubt, that his wedding ring had been taken. Does this suggest anything to you? Suppose that some enemy of his old life tracked him down, committed this crime. What possible reason could he have for taking his wedding ring? For an instant, I could have sworn I saw that the faintest shadow of a smile flickered over the woman's lips. "I cannot really tell," she answered. "It is certainly the most extraordinary thing. I cannot really tell. Oops. Well, we will not detain you any longer. We are sorry to put you through this trouble at such a time," said the inspector. "There are some other points, no doubt, but we can refer to you when they arise." She arose, and I was again conscious of that quick, questioning glance with which she had just surveyed us. "What impression has any evidence made upon you?" The question might have been spoken then. With a bow, she swept from the room. "She's a beautiful woman, a very beautiful woman," said MacDonald thoughtfully, after the door had closed behind her. "This man, Barker, has certainly been down here for a good deal. He is a man who might be attractive to a woman. He admits that the dead man was jealous, and maybe he knew best himself what cause he had for jealousy. There is that wedding ring. Can't get past that. The man who tears off a wedding ring off a dead man's hand. What do you say of it, Mr. Holmes?" My friend, he sat with his head upon his hands, sunk in the deepest thought. Now he rose and rung the bell. "Ames," he said, when the butler entered. "Where is Mr. Cecil Barker now?" "I will see, sir." He came back a moment to say that Barker was in the garden. "Can you remember, Ames, what Mr. Barker had on his feet the night you joined him in the study?" "Yes, Mr. Holmes. He had a pair of bedroom slippers. I bought him boots when he went for the police. Where are the slippers now?" "They're still under the chair in the hall." "Very good, Ames. It is, of course, important for us to know which tracks may be Mr. Barker's and which from outside." "Yes, sir. I may say that I noticed that his slippers were stained with blood. So indeed were my own. That is natural enough considering the condition of the room. Very good, Ames. We will ring you if we want you." A few minutes later, we were in the study and Holmes had brought him the carpet slippers from the hall. As Ames observed, the soles were both dark with blood. "Strange," murmured Holmes, as he stood in the light of the window examining them minutely. "Very strange indeed." Stooping with one of his quick feline pounces, placed the slipper upon the blood mark on the sill. It was exactly correspondent. He smiled in the silence of his colleagues. The inspector was transfigured with excitement. His native accent rattled like sticks upon railings. "Man," he cried, "there's no doubt of it. Baker had just marked the window himself. It was a good deal broader than any boot mark. I mind you that it was a splay foot, and here's the explanation. But the game, Mr. Holmes. What's the game?" "What's the game?" my friend repeated thoughtfully. White Mason chuckled and rubbed his fat fingers together in professional satisfaction. "I said it was a snorter," he cried.